friends, today I'm going to show you how to make my Swiss method recipe. Today's video is just going to be the basic Swiss method recipe that I use for all of my macarons. There's no flavorings, no fillings, just a straight up basic recipe with lots of tips and tricks for you. The Swiss method, unlike the French method, you don't start whipping the egg whites as they are. Before you start whipping them, you mix them with the sugar and you put over a double boiler and you whisk over the double boiler with barely simmering water until the sugar has melted, and then you start to whip them. And what that does is that it helps you achieve a very stable meringue for two reasons. Number one, because the addition of heat into the mixture makes so the proteins uncurl more easily when you're whipping the meringue. And the second reason is because the sugar melts and that increases the viscosity of the syrup, that coats the air bubbles and that coats the water particles, which makes for a very strong structure for the meringue. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you learned something. Let's sift the almond flour and powdered sugar together. It's important to make sure all of our ingredients are measured out and set aside before starting. Now let's wipe everything down with vinegar, all of the tools we're going to use. This helps with getting rid of any grease particles that might be on the tools. Grease can break down the protein structures that form the meringue. Weigh the granulated sugar and then add the egg white powder and whisk to combine. Egg white powder is optional and it's not right for everyone and for all weathers. I have a great article on egg white powder and I'm linking it down below on the description box. Whisking the egg white powder and the sugar is important to prevent the egg white powder from clumping up. Now you can add the fresh egg whites and whisk to combine. Place the bowl over a pan with barely simmering water and whisk just until the sugar has completely melted, which should take a couple of minutes. You can test by touching the mixture with your fingers, and if you don't feel any sugar granules, you can remove it from the heat. Transfer the syrup to the bowl of an electric mixer. Start whipping on low for about 30 seconds. That will be speed 2 of the KitchenAid. Then raise the speed to 4 and whip on speed 4 for about 2 minutes. I like to finish whipping the meringue on speed 6. It takes me about 13 to 16 minutes to whip the meringue. However, you should not go by time. Time whipping will largely depend on your weather, the quality of the eggs you're using, and on your mixer, so don't go by time. Here, you just want to whip until the meringue has achieved a stiff peak consistency. So even if you use the same settings as I'm using here, it doesn't necessarily mean it will take you the same amount of time to whip the meringue as it does for me. Whip the meringue until it has achieved stiff peaks. When you swirl the whisk on the bottom of the bowl, you should feel slight resistance from the meringue. The peak should be shooting straight up and not bending down to the side. And if you look on the bottom of the meringue collected by the whisk, you'll notice soft but defined waves, as you can see here. Add the sifted dry ingredients to the bowl and also food coloring if using any. Here I'm using a couple of drops of egg yellow and gold by Americolor. Start folding the meringue with a spatula. Fold until the perfect consistency is achieved. First, you will fold just with a J motion by cutting through the middle of the batter with a spatula and then around and over. Towards the end, you want to squeeze the batter with a spatula against the sides of the bowl to help release air bubbles. Stop folding the batter when it's flowing off the spatula slowly and effortlessly. You should be able to pick up some batter with a spatula and draw several figure eights with the batter that's flowing off the spatula without having it break up. And even after the batter breaks up, you should still continue to flow slowly off the spatula. Transfer the batter to a piping bag fitted with a round tip. I like to use a Wilton 12, which measures 1/4 of an inch in diameter, and then seal the top with a bag tie. Let's pipe the macarons. Place the bag directly 90 degrees over the center of each circle template. Apply pressure to release the batter and then pull it up, twisting at the top. Tap the trays against the counter or against the palm of your hands to release any air bubbles, and then use a toothpick to pop any remaining air bubbles from the surface of the shells. Now I'll show you both methods on baking, resting and no resting. The first tray I piped is going to rest. So after piping the shells, we're going to let them rest until they're dry to the touch. I'm using this rimless baking tray, which is my favorite to use on my large oven. Since that oven has such uneven heat distribution, the rimless trays allows for the air to flow better and the heat gets distributed more evenly throughout the shells. When you can touch a macaron and it doesn't stick to your finger, it's time to bake. We're gonna bake the macarons in the preheated oven. I baked mine at 310 Fahrenheit on the large oven. And I preheat the oven for about 90 minutes to 2 hours before baking. This helps with oven temperature fluctuations, as well as I have a pizza stone on the bottom of the oven, which keeping the oven's temperature a bit more constant. After 6 minutes baking, I like to rotate the tray in the oven, and since my oven is so uneven, the temperature in the front is very different than the temperature in the back, so this helps the feet rise evenly on all sides. Depending on your oven, you don't have to rotate the trays during baking. I baked my macarons for about 18 minutes. You know the macarons are done baking when you can try to move a macaron and it doesn't feel jiggly. Also touch the top of a shell, and if it doesn't feel soft, it's done baking. Let the shells cool down completely before removing them from the mat and filling. Now let's bake the shells with the no rest method. I'm going to use my small countertop oven. So I will be piping them in this small quarter sheet pan. Then bang the tray against the counter or against the palm of your hands to release any air bubbles, and use a toothpick to remove any air bubbles. Also, notice how I'm baking with the tray upside down. This allows for the air to flow better and evenly through the shells, as I've explained before with the rimless baking tray. This is going to prevent cracked or lopsided shells. So with the countertop oven, I don't have to let the shells rest. I bake them straight after piping, unless they have a lot of food coloring. The temperature I use is 290 Fahrenheit. Also, I don't have to rotate the macarons in the small oven. Bake until the shells don't feel soft to the touch or jiggly. If they feel jiggly, continue to bake. It takes me about 23 minutes to bake one tray of shells in this small oven. Once the shells feel firm, you can remove them from the oven. Let the shells cool down before removing them from the mat and filling. After you fill the macarons with the filling of your choice, you can place them in the fridge and let them mature for 24 hours. The maturing process of the macarons is going to help the textures and the flavors come together, because the filling is going to help hydrate the shells. So they're going to absorb some of the moisture of the filling and they're going to become soft and chewy. They're going to have the perfect macaron consistency that we're looking for. So now I want to talk to you about storing your macarons. I store my macarons in an airtight container. You can leave them in the fridge for about 7 days if they're unfilled, and you can leave them in the freezer for up to 2 months if the shells are not filled. And after the shells have been frozen, you don't have to thaw them or anything. You can just pull them out of the freezer and you can just fill them. And if you're worried about condensation, when you take the container out of the freezer, you can just leave it on top of the counter for like 10 or 20 minutes until it comes to room temperature a little bit. And then you can open the container and start filling your shells. However, if you're keeping the filled shells in the freezer, depending on the filling that you're using, it can last for up to a month or so. If you're using a filling that's a little bit more wet, like a jam or a curd, it might last a little bit less time because the curd and the jam are going to make the shells a little bit softer. But if you're using a filling like a buttercream or a ganache or even a cream cheese frosting, the shells are less likely to become soggy, so they'll last a little bit longer in the freezer. And in the fridge, I like to keep my macarons for up to 4 to 5 days. After that, I would just put them in the freezer. I hope you enjoyed today's video and I hope it was helpful to you. I'm also going to put some links down below in the description box of articles that I've posted on my blog that are talking about troubleshooting, tips and tricks, the science behind macarons, and all that good stuff, all the knowledge that's really going to help you in your macaron journey. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!